am so honored and privileged to introduce our next speaker, my dear, dear friend Miranda, who is the SVP of Customer Success at Datasembly, who's going to be leading us through lessons that she's learned through layoffs and leading in hard times. Welcome to the stage, Miranda.
Hello, everybody. Oh, there's my mic. How's everyone doing? All right, I can't see you that well, so you'll probably see me doing this a lot. So when I was putting this presentation together, I literally redid it 4 times. This is such an important conversation, and while many of you may not be leading layoffs or been laid off, this is something that is probably top of mind for many of us, so definitely excited to have the conversation with you all today. And I do want to make this like a conversation between friends rather than me standing up here with a presentation, which I do have. So, save your questions, let's talk, because this is something that we're all faced with right now. A little bit about me. For those that don't know me, my name's byMaranda Dziekonski. I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Success. I also have listed on my resume a fractional COO for Our Work. Our Work is the company in which I'm talking about today, where I led us through 2 rounds of layoffs. So we're going to dig into that here today. I am also a retired human resource leader. I like to put that feather in my cap. I've owned human resources at multiple companies. Where I was at Swiftly for 4 years, I was their Chief Customer Officer and Chief People Officer. I've also held other titles like COO for another company where I had human resources. I've built it from scratch multiple times. So I like to bring the human first approach to everything I do. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll probably see that a lot. I'm also on my 9th startup. Many of you may be like, wow, are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? Yes, yes, and yes. Before I joined Startup World, though, I did spend 9 years in an organization that was a $40+ billion a year company. And I wanted to make an impact, a more immediate impact, and feel like I was a little bit more than a cog in the wheel. So I shifted to startups, and I've never looked back. I'm also right now in 4 different books. Pretty proud of that. Just little interviews in these books, but how fun to be part of something so great with so many great leaders. And of course, I am more than my resume. I'm a mom, a fur mom, a wife, and this is my family here. I'm also a big outdoors person. I love hiking, and I've now taken up mountain biking. And this is my son, who will be 23 in March, which just seems crazy because myself, I'm only 25. But I have a 22-year-old who has hair down to here, and it blows my mind every day. All right, I can't see you, and I know everybody's doing lots of hand-raising things, but those that are still here, how many of you are leaders? Okay. How many of you are practitioners? Perfect. And how many of you have been impacted by layoffs in 2023? Either you were laid off, you led a layoff, you are part of a company that did a layoff, because everybody is impacted differently. Okay, last question. Well, 2 questions. How many of you are right now looking for a job? Okay, look around. How many of you are hiring? Look around. Okay, you all should talk to each other. Okay, make sure you're doing that. That's what this is for as well, this event. So layoffs.fyi, if you're not following that, it's a very interesting data point, is saying right now, as of 2023, we've had about 240,000 people laid off. Of course, that's not capturing every layoff out there. I did my own little survey just to kind of get a feel, and the comments in this was very interesting. So if you go to my LinkedIn and read through it, you're going to see a lot of interesting comments. But out of 714 votes, you kind of see what the makeup was just in our community. All right. So even if you are in a company that's doing great, I hope that what I share with you today is useful. While I would never wish this upon anyone, what I have experienced over the last 6 months has been probably the biggest learning lessons I've ever had in my professional career. And I'm hopeful that some of the things that I'm going to share with you all will help you get to a more proactive state as leaders. So take this in our typical customer success mindset as my retro for you. Okay, so my postmortem for you. What I'm going to show you, start thinking about how you can take these lagging indicators of things that we have been through in this organization and use them as leading insights for you, okay? Flip it around, and like I say, if we have churn, the only way it's really in vain is if we don't learn from it, grow from it, get better from it. It's the same thing here. The entire industry is going through a big shift. There's a lot of changes going on, and the only way this is all happening in vain is if we just don't get better from it, learn from it, grow from it, and evolve. All right, so those that know me know it took me a long time to make the decision to leave Swiftly. I talked to a few of you, and it took me probably about a year. I was there for 4 years, finally made that decision, and then I talked to 39 companies, did my due diligence, selected a company that I was going to join, very excited. During my second week in the organization, I started kind of going through some numbers, and I did my due diligence. I just want to reiterate that. Things just weren't mapping. I was noticing inconsistencies in gross retention, and our depending on who I spoke with, I got one number, and depending on what system I looked in, I got a different number. And that's when I asked, can I get access to the P&L? Got access and started digging through and realized we had a problem. Called up the CEO and said, things aren't mapping up, we should talk. And we soon realized that we had a financial problem on our hands. And we needed to react quick. What we thought was a 12 to 18 month runway was probably closer to 4 to 6 months. So we had to make some big decisions and figure out how do we move this boat in another direction. And at this point, it was a 75 plus person organization, not massive, but a little harder to steer quickly than it would be if it was, say, like a 20 or 30 person organization. So the company had been a growth at all cost kind of company, VC backed. They just came off from their biggest quarter in history. And while there are many factors in which I'm going to go through here, and this is where you as leaders should take notes and dig in your organizations, there are many, many factors that resulted in us having 2 rounds of layoffs. And hopefully, hopefully if you have 1 or 2 of these, that's bad, but hopefully you don't have all of these like we did. But I'm going to go through them with you just really quickly and then talk about some human things as well. So as you all know, funding slowed down. We were banking on being able to go and get a Series B. Funding slowed down. The expectations of investors changed as well. What was true before changed, like the unit economics that they were looking at, very different than the unit economics they were looking at, let's say mid last year. We did have mismanaged spend, obviously. And then, even though we just came off from our first, our strongest quarter ever, our financial growth slowed quickly. And then on top of that, we started seeing customers churn. Customers started viewing us as a nice to have, not a must have. But wait, there's more. We also had operational inefficiencies. So we were hiring for future growth. We had the wrong people in the wrong seats. We had people that were good maybe for a very early throw spaghetti at the wall phase, and maybe not as good for the let's get this more matured phase, or folks who had very large organization experience and were over-architecting things. Great people, just wrong people, wrong phase type of situation. We also had an over-tooling situation. The tool, you name it, we had it. We had every tool. We had Jira and GitLab. We had Salesforce and HubSpot. We had it all. And it wasn't being utilized appropriately. It was let's put a tool in to solve a problem instead of let's think through the problem and then figure out the tool. We also had some missed renewals, missed billings, all of it. And a big part too is we did not have that unifying goal, the unifying KPIs. We had silos happening. The rapid growth was really kind of took the company a bit to its knees. But wait, there's more. We also had a lack of product innovation. So the product didn't evolve quick enough to keep up, to surpass the competitors or keep ahead of the competitors. And I put this reminder here, but I'm a big believer in this, that product is the tip of the spear. I said it on LinkedIn, I'll say it again, you can sell garbage, but you can't renew garbage, right? So that is a reminder, partner with your product folks. We've heard it earlier here, it's important. Product is the tip of the spear. While the startup that I am talking about hasn't failed, and I'm a believer that because of everything we know now, that we can right this ship. But I wanted to go out and just take a look at what are the reasons in 2022 why startups failed. And you can see lack of product market fit, marketing problems, team problems, all of these things are listed on here. We could literally check every single box on this. So it was what I call the perfect storm. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what I learned. I'm going to cover some of the basics from the business side, and then I'm going to hop into the human side. As I said earlier, I redid this presentation 4 times trying to think about what do I want to share here. But as somebody who has sat in the seat and, on the Zoom, 30 back-to-back calls, personally laying people off, personally partnering with the lawyers, thinking through the legalities. I want to share with you just some of that side, but then also some of the human things. All right. So funding is tough right now. We keep hearing it. I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing about it, but it's true. Funding is tough. This is where we are. So leaders, right now, it's important that more than ever, you know the metrics that drive your business and the metrics that drive your customers' businesses. And it's really crucial that you understand the metrics that your investors find attractive and how you are performing to those. So the first learning is plan for a longer than usual runway. Everyone here, I don't care if you are a practitioner, a CEO, a VP of CS, you need to understand the unit economics that drive your business, where you are with runway, and how your role impacts that into the bigger picture. Get close to your customers and your prospects, like BFFs, be close to them. Understand, again, what makes their businesses tick? How do they think about budget? How are they setting budget? When are they setting budget? What is viewed as mission critical in their organization versus nice to have? You have to know these things. You've been hearing me say this, if you follow me, for a long time. ROI, ROI, ROI. It is mission critical that your organizations are driving value. Again, if you're not driving value for your customers, not just driving value, but showing them that they're getting value or partnering with them to show them you're getting value, you're going to be viewed as not mission critical. Innovate or die. Again, product is the tip of the spear. And right people, right phase. I know where I fit. I don't fit in an organization that is a $200 million a year organization. I would not be the right person, right fit. I also probably don't belong somewhere where that's $500,000 of revenue because I am not a throw spaghetti at the wall kind of girl. Spoiler alert. All right. So a few things before you do have to make that decision. And again, reverse engineer this. But make sure this step is necessary. Leaders, make sure you're partnering with, if you're a CEO out here or a COO, make sure you're partnering with the other executives in your organization. Really make sure this step is necessary. Analyze your financials again and again and again. Like, exhaust all possibilities. What I did here is a line-by-line audit of our expenses. I understood, where are we spending money? What contracts can we get out of? And you all should know this as CS leaders. There are other people out there right now, like me, looking at our tech spend and saying, can I cancel this contract? What does my terms of services say? Do I have a clause in there so I can term for convenience? Right? You should know this. Do scenario planning, benchmarking. If I cut this amount of people from sales, what does that mean for my revenue? If I cut this amount of people from product, what does that mean for product innovation? Like, really think through everything. Make sure your criteria on who will be cut is clear. Who will and who won't. A lot of organizations use this to eliminate poor performers. A lot don't. Understand what your criteria is and how you are going to communicate that out to the rest of your organization, which will come up in a minute. Keep your external resources and advocates close. These are your advisors, your investors, your board. These folks talk to so many other individuals that are probably in the same position as you, can offer you advice, things that you should be thinking through, all of that. Keep them very close. And then, this is a big learning for me. Go deep enough that first time so you don't have to do it again. I did not do that and then had to do a second layoff. And it felt like the worst day of my life. And it was a much bigger layoff because I didn't go aggressive enough that first time around. Again, assess your risks. How is this going to impact your company's ability to succeed? We already talked about that. Put your customers at the center. We've heard folks say, do more with less. Christy say, do different with the same. Like, if you're cutting people, cutting internal resources, your product roadmap is going to change. How you work with your customers has to change. You essentially need to figure out what is going to be the state of the state. Think through your reputation risk. Don't become a LinkedIn meme, okay? We all see them, how people have handled this so poorly. Don't become that LinkedIn meme. And then, of course, link arms with your legal consultants. You won't believe the nuances, state to state, that you have to think through. Like, if you're exiting someone over the age of 40, you have to put an age chart on your paperwork, little things like that. If you are a leader that has to go through this, have legal advisors with you. Communication, communicate, communicate. What are you going to say to your customers? How will you talk to them about this? Because especially if you're cutting customer-facing people, they're going to know. You know, will they run for the hills? You know, how you communicate this is important. And the same to the impacted team members. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Train the folks that have to deliver the messages. Don't just throw a manager in with a script and say, here, go read this. Like, partner with them, train them, and also be there to support them. This is difficult. It's incredibly difficult for the folks that are sitting on the other side. I don't want to downplay that, but it is terrifying for the folks that have to deliver this to all of these individuals. Media, larger organizations, don't forget this, because they will pick up on it. You want to be ahead of that. And the last thing I want to call out on this slide is, this is emotional for everybody. Hold space for that. Acknowledge it. Be incredibly transparent about what led to this decision, what the goals are going forward, and how you want the company or how you're hoping people will show up and partner together. I've already called out staying close to your investors. I want to call this out again. The investors are a tremendous resource during this. And they have access, most do, have access to communities that can help you through this. Afterwards, make sure you're getting back to basics. We got spoiled. We heard it earlier. We got spoiled by people making it rain, dollar bills, and we were hiring and we were buying tools. Got to get back to basics. Even if you're not in a place right now where you're having to, go through a layoff, right now, I challenge every one of us to get back to basics. Think about our capital efficiencies, our operational efficiencies. How do we train our teams? How do we get them the tools that they need to be able to, really get in deep with our customers where they need to? How do you leverage AI to augment, the motion, your customer success motion? I call out as well, creating balanced process and structure. I have seen companies be taken to their knees by having way too much process. And I've also seen taken to their knees by having too much process, right? So do the Goldilocks. Make sure you have the right amount of process for the phase you're in. And I already called out getting close to your customers. Let's take a few minutes and talk about the human side. Empathy. I only put one word on this slide because as somebody who has personally gone through layoffs years and years ago, who knows multiple people in my personal world that has currently been impacted by multiple layoffs. I know individuals who, over the last couple of years, who have been laid off twice, right? Put on your hat and understand what it's like for the individuals in your org right now who are watching this go on. If you are not talking to your team about the state of the economy, even if you're not going through a layoff or a reduction in force, if you're not talking to the team about where your runway is, they're creating their own narrative because they're watching what's going on around them. Put on your hat, put on your empathy hat. If you are somebody who is getting ready to do this or go through this, you'll never regret doing the right thing. What do I mean by that? I worked hard to take care of the folks that were impacted by this reduction in force. Some of you probably saw my LinkedIn post where I was highlighting folks that were impacted from my company, trying to get visibility on their LinkedIn profiles to help them get to their next opportunity. Do what you can do. One, to give them a package to help them have a soft landing, training, open up resources, figure out how you can help them. You'll never regret doing the right thing. You'll never regret doing the right thing. Talked a little bit about this, but extreme transparency is so crucial right now with your organizations. I cannot believe the amount of organizations right now that are not talking to their team members about where they are with runway. How are they performing to their top line revenue goals? What's happening with churn? Paint the picture. What's going to happen is something magical. If you open up to your team and share what unit economics are important, what are the KPIs that we're all centered around, you have, I guarantee, a bunch of smart individuals in your org that are going to link arms and come together to help drive those numbers and make a huge impact. So extreme transparency is key. Don't be afraid. I know a lot of people are guardians if things aren't going well. They're afraid to share this with their team because they're worried about folks leaving. Worry about the folks that want to stay when you're hiding information more. Surface it. I think this is self-explanatory. Stay close to your teams, stay close to your people, and show up and deliver. Honestly, after you go through something like this, like that day when you call everybody together after the reduction in force, that's the moment in time where you have to start building that trust or rebuilding that trust and that confidence in your leadership, in your organization, that they should stay and help rebuild or help carry on. Keep that in mind. And remember, we're all human, every one of us. You don't have to be a business bot when you're going through this. It's okay to be human and be human with your teams. Use my learnings to your advantage, but also remember, as leaders, we are the ones that are ultimately responsible. All of those things that I listed in the beginning are just a culmination of many mistakes, many mishaps that were made, but ultimately, I don't care if I was there for 2 weeks or 2 years, I was responsible. And we all are. That's it. Any questions? I see faces. I don't see any questions. Oh, I got one. Okay. Yep. Put my sunglasses on.
So you mentioned that you did due diligence before you joined that company, and then you got there and you saw discrepancies. Were they hiding things, or it was just a matter of they couldn't share that data with you before you joined?
They weren't hiding things. I want to be clear.
Yeah.
They weren't hiding things. There wasn't anything fraudulent going on. They had stuff in Salesforce, stuff in HubSpot. Things were marked as renewed in one system, but then never billed. Things weren't. There was just a whole culmination of mishaps. But there was nobody that was deliberately hiding anything. We had a fractional CFO who was there for 5 hours a week, who really wasn't keeping on top of things.
So it sounds like that was unavoidable. Would there be anything that you would have done differently?
I did do differently.
Okay.
I am 6 weeks in, and for the first time ever in my career, I insisted I see a balance sheet in P&L before I joined. I said I would sign an NDA, but I insisted. And I always felt a little uncomfortable about doing that before. I would ask the right questions, like tell me about your runway, where are you with ARR, what's your ARR to headcount ratio, what's your growth plan? Like I have a full list of questions published out there, and I would always go through those questions, but I never asked to see the P&L or balance sheet because it felt a little like invasive. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not afraid anymore of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Having laid off about 20% of the company last year, we had, of course, to do job restructuring and job changes and sort of reimagine teams. And as a leadership team, we kind of had thoughts in motion before the layoffs were announced because we were keeping ahead of that planning. And we did an okay job, but certainly could have done better, and we'll learn from that. But any tips on how to engage the remaining employees in reimagining their roles and sort of coming back together as a team? What's the right process? When do you start telling them how long to mourn before you move on? That kind of thing.
So you don't have time to mourn, right? I hate to say that. It's true. You don't. You have to get everybody engaged right away. What we did in the first layoff I learned from. We tried to handle it with kid gloves. We were real quiet, real professional about it, did an announcement, and then I just threw that out the window. I'm like, that's all garbage. The second time, very transparent in communication, and then right after, just pulled everyone together and said, you're now like the ground zero team. We want you to help us rebuild this. We started having brainstorm sessions, getting together OKRs, having key initiatives, and having teams cross-functionally aligned under 5 key initiatives that were going to move the company forward, regular check-ins, like just a lot of communication, a lot of togetherness, and lots of Zoom calls. It's a really good question. And trust me, we're not perfect, but we did better the second time from learning from the first time. The first time it was very professional and too buttoned up.
We got one more.
Awesome.
Did you have any retention issues after the layoffs? And if so, how did you mitigate those? I think you kind of spoke to it a little bit about the Zoom calls, things of that nature, but how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I predicted that when we were doing the first layoff, we would probably lose folks. We didn't. When we did the second layoff, we did. I think we lost confidence in individuals because we had done it, didn't do it deep enough. So we did lose individuals. We had to backfill a few of the roles. What we ended up doing is actually calling folks that we had previously laid off and asking them if they wanted to come back, and they did. So, I mean, I don't know if that's, I think that's a good sign, but I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, okay, awesome. If anybody wants to chat more about this, please feel free to stop me. I'm around, or reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone, for this time.